He's back. It is a massive win for Wisconsin. We're going to tell you what Nyzier Forqureen coming back means for the Badgers this year, and if it's good for the sport in general. That's coming up next. Locked On Badgers.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? My camera tracks me. Sometimes it turns on and tracks me. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 0 is no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. I'm your host, Ryan Herring, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Excited to be here. We're talking Nyzier Forqureen coming back. How good is this secondary now? What would you grade this secondary, Justin? Plus, I want to ask big picture, how are you feeling about the defense now? We've seen updated height, weight. Now you got Forqureen back. But first, we got to start with the big news. Nyzier Forqureen comes back. I want to start with just the overall ruling. So district judge, I'm going to obviously paraphrase this greatly. We're not going to read a legal document on this show. But the district judge, I think this is an important distinction, did not rule that the Division II years that Forqureen had didn't count. What he ruled is the waiver should have been in place, given the fact that Nyzier did not play much in 2021. There should have been kind of an extending situation given to him because obviously he was dealing with the loss of his father. He didn't play a lot of snaps. So it was not necessarily a ruling that says Division II years don't count. I think that's really important to a distinction. It was more about the judge saying there needs to be more waivers for personal hardships. I thought that was an interesting distinction. It was less about the D2 years and more about we think he should have got a waiver for that 1 year. Big picture, Justin, Nyzier Forqureen's coming back. We're going to focus on the football impact of that first for the Badgers this year. What do you think?
Well, it's a massive for Wisconsin. I think this makes you feel far better about the secondary in terms of just experience. I would say that, if you're going to give a 1 through 10 grade on this, just looking at the starters, I would say you're looking at a 7 or an 8 and feeling pretty good about those two out there. What I do want to see this season is I think you need to go heavy on getting the youth involved. You need to get, guys like Emilio Agard out there. You need to get Jay Harper out there and get them reps, because now it's clear those guys are going to be playing massive reps for you probably the following year. So you're going to have to give those guys an opportunity to kind of get their legs under them and be ready, because you can't keep playing the transfer portal game with this. If you really want to be high level at a position, you need guys that are well versed in your scheme and have been trained to do it the way you want it.
Yep. You have to develop depth from the high school spot and train those guys up. The staff has talked about that. I've said it before on the show. I've talked to people, kind of connected to the program, who have said Nyzier was the best cornerback we had last year. It wasn't Rico. I mean, getting him back is an enormous win. And we went for months talking about you had all these transfers, right? And you could lose Rico. And we just said you were going to lose Nyzier. Nyzier's gone, because we didn't even really think about this as a possibility. You go from that scenario to, okay, Rico's back, Nyzier's back. I think these starters, for me, it's like an 8 out of 10 considering the Badgers, right? Like, I'll give you an example. What starting duo do you like more, Justin? I went back to the 2021 season because that Badger defense was number 1 in the Big Ten. They were insane. That starting cornerback duo was Faion Hicks, Caesar Williams.
Oh, this is better than that. I don't think it's close.
I agree.
I think Wisconsin's so problematic with this because the pedigree of the cornerback position has been so bad, and that's not to slight them. I'm talking NFL pedigree for guys. They have not had a lot of guys that you'd look at and say that guy's got an NFL future. I think the last time we probably would say that, you'd look back and say that that's legitimately the starting tandem was what? Mike Eccles might have been playing out there.
You had tandems like, Nick Nelson and Derek Tyndall. Nick Nelson was a 4th-round pick.
Nelson was, but Tyndall was never a guy you were looking at as an NFL guy. So you have one guy here and there. But the last time we started legitimately 2 guys that were NFL quality guys, it was Eccles and Fletcher. So that's the last time we saw 2 guys that you're like, okay, these are 2 dudes.
It is a low bar. Just in terms of NFL standpoint, that's a very fair point. And it's also worth pointing out that 2001 defense, like a lot of the great Badgers defense,
was number 1 in the country or something like that.
Loaded up front, right? Like, which that helps that secondary duo. But my bigger point is, like, you feel okay about this starting duo now. You feel more than okay.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, a lot's going to come down to how good this defense is going to be. Is going to 100% be the defensive line. If the defensive line takes a solid step forward here, everything gets better on defense. But these two guys are very ingrained in this defense. They are very technical. And I think Nyzier we've always felt, has had some pretty good upside physically. He's a guy who's very physical. He's not a burner, but he's a guy who can definitely play the position at a quality level. I think you'd say both of them. Really, the only teams that you're afraid of them against are, you're looking at a team like Oregon or
Ohio State, who we play next year with Jeremiah Smith,
where you're going to have NFL first-round type talents out there, and those are guys who can expose even draft picks at corner.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. Jeremiah Smith burns everybody in college football. Like, Marvin Harrison before him, Marvin Harrison Jr. burns everybody in college football. Like,
and if he doesn't beat you, one of the other guys does.
Yeah, those guys are uncoverable to some degree. Thomas Miller below is huge. I agree. I want to also bring up another point. Nyzier coming over from Division II, we saw a massive jump from him last year, right? Yeah. His first year on campus to last year. I think there's still, I don't think a jump to that degree, but there's another jump in him, I think. Like,
I believe so.
I think both these guys are NFL corners, not first, second, third round guys, but I think they can play in the NFL. And if you have two NFL-ish type cornerbacks, now listen, that pass rush has to get better, man. But like, I feel totally good about the starters now. I'm not even concerned about the starters at all.
Yeah.
Now I want to ask you, what about the depth? My next question was, is this cornerback room better than last year's? Really quickly, last year we lost obviously Xavier Lucas, who was a high upside guy, didn't play a lot. Then you also lost a Delancey, a Lofi, a Declona, and then you're bringing in. So then you have a bump from last year's Hallman and Nyzier to this year. You're bringing in Grammy Lattimore, Deone Hill, and this freshman group. Which cornerback group do you like more, last year's or this year's?
Probably last year's. I don't think it's like, I think that this year is more than adequate for us defensively. I mean, I don't love it against the schedule that we have. But if they struggle, it's not going to be because they're bad corners. It's going to be because the defensive line is just not getting any pressure and they're being kind of hung out to dry too long. So I think they'll be fine. I even think that, like, I really am high on Agard and Harper, and even some of these young guys may flash some things where they may get some spot reps. Like a guy like Washington, don't expect him to play much, but I wouldn't be shocked to see him in some of the easier games, potentially getting out there for a series or something like that just to get his feet wet. I think some of the other guys that they brought in from the portal, there's some possibilities there, but I don't know if there's anybody that you look at. Like slot corner, I think is a position we're going to have to figure out. Like, I don't know who takes that spot going into this year.
I think I like this year's group a little bit better, just slightly.
That's fair.
I think the depth guys
starters are going to be more polished.
I think the starters are a little more polished. Listen, Lucas is a hit just in like upside, but he's not really a hit in how he played last year because he didn't give you a lot of snaps.
Yeah, he got beat a fair amount last year too.
And he did. And I feel like you lost depth guys for sure, but I kind of feel like that's what your portal guys are. They're coming in to kind of replace those depth guys. And I really like Harper and Agard as young guys who have some potential. I like the group that they got coming in the 25 class. I think one of those guys is going to play a little bit, maybe two of them. Kairos Gaines is another guy who could play a little bit this year, potentially in some off-zone coverage type situations. I kind of think it's a little bit better. Now, again, that's not going to matter if you can't hit the quarterback.
Yeah.
But I do kind of think the quarterback was a little bit better.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I mean, guys like Harper and Agard were freshmen last year. So if they would have played, you would have been like, it's incredible that they're even out there. This year, you kind of look at them and you're like, okay, you kind of have had some technical work done, and now you should understand this defense. You should have a pretty good idea where you can at least get your feet wet out there and give spot duty here and there.
Yep, I agree. All right, we're going to take a quick break there. We're going to come back and talk about the defense as a whole. Does Justin feel better about the defense now than he did a couple months ago, seeing new heights and weights, some impressive gains from the defensive line, and now you got Rico and Nyzier back? We're going to see if Justin's good with the defense line and defense as a whole going into next year. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. First, a quick break for our friends of the show over at Prizepicks. Prizepicks is the #1 spot for all your daily fantasy. Listen, I think Justin and I are probably on the same page here. Neither of us are going through every single page of fantasy sports magazines to understand every niche so we can compete with the people that spend thousands of hours doing this and win every single league. No, because we have things to do like play in NCAA dynasty leagues and drink beer. So we don't have time for that. Prizepicks is daily fantasy made easy. It's just you against the numbers, more or less. You're just picking more touchdowns, less yards, whatever it is. It's simple. It's easy. Over 10 million members and billions with a capital B awarded in winnings. Prizepicks makes it fun and simple to get on the action. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 off instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prizepicks, run your game. All right, let's come back to this. Let's talk a little defense here. Just big picture. I want to, before we get into the big picture of the Xavier Lucas cheese, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole of the Nyzier Forqureen decision. Justin, defense is a general. We've seen new heights and weights come out. I think it's been a pretty impressive group just from a physicality standpoint coming in. Now you have these cornerbacks back. Are you okay with the defense?
I feel better about the defensive line group in general because the bodies make more sense. They fit a lot more what you're actually looking to do. Now, the question I will have is really from a coaching standpoint and scheme standpoint, will you be able to maximize what they're capable of? I like some of the bodies in that room. I was talking to you earlier this week. I said I took a look at Michael Garner's high school film. And I said, I legitimately like this better than Wilnerson Telemox. He was an 82 out of high school. And I'm like, he's a better athlete. Like I watched the film. I'm like, he's more sudden. He's quicker than what we saw from Telemock. And I'm like, there's some of the similar issues. Like he gets very upright when he would do it, but his senior film was better. And by the time I'm done looking at it, I'm like, this is a guy who there's some potential there. Like he's a guy that could be one of those guys that's out there that could be disruptive in like a 5-tech role for us. He's 6'7", 305 now, I believe.
Yeah, that's from Brady himself, 6'7", 305. That's great size, man.
Absolutely. That you would want him at 280 or 290, and to be 305. If he's still got some of his burst, that's a guy that could be a problem. If he's got his technique down, and if he can keep the pad level down with that type of length, he does have some burst to him.
I'll say this. I feel like it's just more solid, man. I've used that word so much this offseason, but you look at the 300-pound, like Perk, Reiger is just built. He's not a 300-pounder, he's built. Walker for sure. Peterson, like another just rock solid 310. I don't think these guys are stars. We're not recreating the 2019 Ohio State defensive line here, but it's going to be tougher. It's going to be bigger. And that by itself, and there's a good comment in here from Thomas Miller or from someone I forget. Will Hanna, the pass rush will be better because opposing offensive lines won't be able to just man up on our D-line and blow them off the ball. Mm-hmm. It's going to create more 3rd and 8s because they can't run the ball right down our throats, and that's going to help the pass rush. I kind of feel more solid about this defense than I did last year, and I'm starting to buy in, and I don't know if that's just me buying in again, and that's what I'm worried about.
I made the comment in the Discord because I was talking to somebody, and they're like, oh, here comes everyone getting optimistic again. And I said, listen, I do think that the players that they have in that room are going to be better this year. That does not mean anything if we don't see them used more effectively and how they actually use them. I'm like, that is going to be the potential ceiling that's put on this defense. I think they're capable of being a good, solid defense. Like some of the stats that we had last year, I can't explain it. Like I cannot explain how we finished dead last in tackle for loss. I can't explain how we're like 10 spots above being dead last for sacks. And it's like, you're still Wisconsin. Like that level of athlete that you have on the field is better than some of these truly awful group of 5 teams. So how are we so bad? So now I look at it and I'm like, I need to see something schematically or whatever that you're finding ways to get guys to be productive. And I think there's some tools in this. Like there's guys that have to be out there. Heiberger athletically needs to be out on the field. Clayton, we've seen how much burst that guy has off the edge. I would say right now he might be the most explosive pass rusher they have on the edge on the entire team. And you need to find a way, whether it's he comes in on a 3rd and 9 and you just say, go after him. And maybe that's only games you have a quarterback that you're not afraid as a run threat. So be it. That's fine. Get him on the field and get him reps. Because that's a guy that next year you're probably looking at as a starter.
He came in a lot lighter than I thought. Like under 200 pounds. Now he's a little up over it now.
It was only 1 pound.
I know. It's still jarring though, right?
It is. So here's I think if we want to see him be a guy this year, this is where I see where he needs to be. End of spring, you're hoping he's 215, 220. Like, we saw good games. Like, Brady already said he's up to 210. That's promising from that standpoint, provided it's good weight. They're going to have him dialed in from a diet standpoint, that they're going to have him getting the right kind of food into his system. So if he can pack on muscle quickly, the biggest thing you'll see with him is how does his body adjust to the added weight? And is he going to be a little bit of a baby deer with, 30 extra pounds on him, where you're like, this guy's struggling to kind of get a feel for his body again. But I think they can get him to 230 if they're lucky by fall camp. But I think he needs to leave spring at 215 or so in order for that to happen.
Well, I would say this too, just to ping on Clayton. You don't have to be that big if you're literally just coming in on 3rd and 9. Like, I don't care if you get blown off the ball. If they run a draw, we're going to take that risk. Just on 3rd and 9, bend the edge, get around the corner.
Yep.
You don't have to be 230 to do that in college football. You can be.
Herbig was only 227 and he didn't have the length.
Yeah, no, he had a different type of quickness too. Like, and also low to the ground like an ant running around. Offensive tackles couldn't get their hands on him, but yeah, I think Clayton could play a little bit. I think it comes down to like some of those returning guys too. Like you mentioned Heiberger. I think Sebastian Cheeks could play a big role this year. Allegro, Tackett Curtis. It's some of those pieces, man. And on the back end, it's those safeties, right? Austin Brown, Zachman. I think it's some of those returning pieces, and then sprinkle in a Clayton. But I feel better about it, and I feel like I might be getting duped again because I bought into the linebackers last year. I bought into the receivers year one. But I would say this. Last thing on this, I would say I can tell you this for a fact. They legitimately, with Jared Thompson coming in and becoming the scouting director for college, like for transfer portal stuff on the staff, they made a concerted effort to scout out the transfer portal guys earlier this year than they did last year.
Oh, I have no doubt on that. I figured that for sure, just based off of how they seem to be targeting it. They clearly were checking lower levels a little bit more of where there were guys that they thought they could go after if they became available. I just think when you look at Power 4, like so many guys don't even see the field. So it makes so much more sense to go after the guys that are in group of 5 and, down a level, simply because you've seen them play. There's film. Like you can see if a guy does something right. It doesn't mean it's going to translate for sure, but you at least have seen them be competent or like actually technically sound versus a guy you have no idea with. Like if you're going off of high school film from 2 years ago, you have no idea what this kid's capable of.
Let me ask you big picture, because I did want to hit this quick before. I have a couple like kind of questions I want to hit you with as well, because we haven't talked in a sec. But big picture, Nyzier coming back. Like, take Wisconsin out of it. What are your thoughts for the sport?
I don't love it. You and I talked offline before we came on, and I said we're not even pretending that school matters anymore. Like college doesn't matter. Like when I start seeing arguments be made for stuff like this of I wasn't able to maximize my financial earnings. It's like, what the hell does that have to do with getting a college degree? It has zero bearing on why you're actually supposed to be there. So it really frustrates me seeing stuff like that, because it's like, now we're not even pretending. And it's almost like, what incentive do I have to really care when you're making it clear that the only thing you care about is financial gain? Like, you don't care about the school. You're here to maximize your dollar value. And that's whatever. Everyone does that in the day of life, but you don't get to also play the card, I love my team, I die for my teammates, and then jump ship every year and look for the best deal.
I would say you're going to cheer for teams much like you do pro teams now.
Yeah.
Which
I don't love. There's a reason why I don't follow pro football
that's fair.
As much as I do college.
And that's fair. A lot of people don't. A lot of people prefer the college sport because of that reason. But that's basically what pro players are, right? They're just motivated by money. It is what it is. And still people live and die with their pro teams. I mean, I do. They all suck, but that's
they're all injured. That's
so I'll say I think it's more of a pro model. We talked about it a bunch. I will say this, it opens up again, the judge was very clear on this. It wasn't about that he played D2, it was about there should have been a waiver, in his opinion, granted. But it does open up the door. Look at a Matt Young, who transferred over to Wisconsin. He spent 2 years at Division III. In 2 years, he's going to have a case to say, hey, I should have 2 more years. And we're just going to see so many more of these cases across college football that It's going to be the new norm, for better or worse. It's going to be the new norm.
Yeah, there's going to have to be something that's done with this, and I'm quite honestly kind of irritated that the schools did not get together on this and preemptively kind of try and get something in place. It just shows a complete lack of self-awareness for what was going on. Like some of them, it just feels like they were truly enjoying being able to, play, I guess, what's the best way to describe it? Like go to the store and pick up whatever players they want. And it's like, you guys aren't getting it. Like, this is not a good thing. It's going to get worse for you. And I think that that's what's happening now is a lot of these even bigger schools are kind of like, yeah, we're getting kind of worn down with how much like the expectation of what type of pay and everything is expected by these kids. And they're getting sick of it. And I think the school's probably getting sick of it too, because you have these coaches and stuff that are kind of like, I'm getting tired of chasing after guys that I need on my roster that I have to go and run to somebody and be like, can you come up with $500,000 so I can get this player on my roster?
Yeah.
Like, they don't want to spend time doing that. They want to spend time actually trying to figure out how they're going to, what they're going to be doing schematically and what their roster is going to look like and how they can win this year.
I think donors struggle with it too, right? Like there's donor fatigue, there's coaching staff fatigue. I'll tell you this, having talked to players, there's player fatigue too. Players get tired of everybody pulling them in different directions as well. There's a fatigue everywhere. There's podcast fatigue. I'm sick of talking about it at times.
Dude, I went through it, man. You saw I had like a dark period going on with like the late like December time period where I was just sour on everything. I was tired of the negativity of all of it. I was kind of happy that the season ended.
Yeah.
I was like, I need a break from this because you don't get to step away from it. The downside of the podcasting thing is like, we still need to kind of come up and put a show on. It's like, sometimes you just want to walk away from it for a few weeks and be like, no, I don't want to think about this. I want to get away from this and kind of recover.
It makes being a fan different. I'll say that.
Absolutely.
It changes the dynamics a little bit. All right, we're going to take a quick second here. We're going to come back. I'm going to ask Justin kind of an interesting question. Is Wisconsin a stepping stone school? We're going to get into that next on Locked On Badgers, a question that we got from someone who listens to the show. So that's coming up next, Locked On Badgers. First, a quick break for our friends of the show over at FanDuel. FanDuel is the number one source for all your sports betting needs, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network, the official sportsbook of Ryan and Justin, the official sportsbook of Super Bowl 59, the official sportsbook of the NFL. I mean, three of those things are pretty important. And then there's Justin and I. We don't fall in that same tier. But listen, FanDuel's great. User interface is clean. Customer support's great. When you win, you get your payouts really quickly. Right now over at FanDuel, obviously great deal coming up with the Super Bowl. When you right now you get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed if you place your first $5 bet. And you can get a hunch in the middle of the game, live betting. You can bet the coin toss, first touchdown, all over there at FanDuel. It's FanDuel.com, the official sportsbook of the NFL. All right, let's come back to this, Justin. This was an interesting question that somebody put in the chat or on one of the YouTube shows, and I wanted to get into it. I didn't do it yesterday because I ran out of time. This is from Family Man Ty. This was after the Max Steinecker to USC move. But you could also talk about the Xavier Lucas thing. You could talk about other recruits, other coaches, Colin Hitchler leaving to Alabama. You can go down and down. Is Wisconsin a stepping stone program?
Well, number one, the first thing I'll say on this is any program that's in a down period is a stepping stone. It's just the reality of it. If your program's not good, players are always going to be looking for an opportunity to play for a team that's going to give them a shot at a title, to win the conference or whatever. Wisconsin's down right now. It's going to be a problem for us as long as we're not showing that we can compete with the big boys. Wisconsin has to get back to a 10 or 11 win season where you kind of look at it and you're like, yeah, they're legit again. There's no reason why I need to go someplace else because they can beat these teams. In the case of Max, the way I look at it, and you and I had a little bit of difference in opinion on this. Mm-hmm. You viewed it as an opportunity for him to jump up a level to a more prestigious program, which I don't disagree with that. I viewed it as he's taking a move that maybe gives more money but less responsibility, which means he's also probably not going to necessarily get as much spotlight as what he would get as the GM at Wisconsin. Because if Wisconsin does well over the next 2 years and they kill it and everything comes together, he's the star. He's going to be the guy that it all falls on his plate, him and Pat. it's going to be the guy who is above him at USC that is going to get that spotlight. Now he'll definitely get some spotlight because he's a cog in the machine. I just don't think it's quite as valuable as, say, here. Like, if I think you can make the argument that if he's a star here for 2 years, you get an LSU, an Ohio State, or whoever says you're going to be our guy. You could take over as our GM. I don't know if he gets that if he does 2 years at USC.
I would disagree a little bit. I think we disagree on this one a little bit, which is totally cool. Like, I think we should never agree on everything, because then what's the point of having multiple people on the show? I think I would put it in this sense, and I hear you, like, more responsibility at Wisconsin. That could certainly parlay if Wisconsin blows up to a bigger role. I think there's multiple roads to bigger roles, and this Wisconsin one could be one, this USC could be one, they both could be. I would equate it to being like an engineer at Porsche, or a lead engineer at a smaller garage, right? Like, you're just part of a bigger, more prestigious program. He's going to land more talent there, and I think it's going to show out more. It's just a bigger platform for him at USC. And to the first question, is Wisconsin a stepping stone school? Yes, of course they are. Like, I think they always have been to some degree, because every school outside of the top 8 teams is a stepping stool.
Well, yeah, I was going to say it depends on what context you're putting it into, because everyone is a stepping stone to Ohio State, Texas,
Bama, Georgia,
Alabama. Yeah,
Notre
there's
Dame.
like 10 teams that are effectively the top tier, and even some of them can cannibalize the others. Like, the schools that I think you don't normally see trade are Ohio State, Alabama, and probably Texas are not likely to have somebody jump ship to go to a job at one of the others, unless there's some type of affiliation with that school that there's a reason for it, or they're just getting paid money that the school just refuses to pay to.
I mean, I think you look back at the history, and again, this is not like a Wisconsin thing. This is most colleges can get rated by the blue bloods.
Mm-hmm. Like, even Michigan can. Well, heck, Ohio State lost their defensive coordinator.
Alabama lost their safety to Ohio State. Like this. So yeah, we are, but I don't think that's like some great indictment on Wisconsin. Rajiv says, agree, Justin. We don't want to be a stepping stone. We need to step up and win games, step into the playoffs. I think if you went to the playoffs, teams would still rate Wisconsin. Not to disagree with what Rajiv is saying or not. Certainly winning helps. Absolutely. But there's still
the style matters.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where if Wisconsin actually proves legitimately to be a real competitive team in that environment, you can hold on to people versus, I mean, it doesn't mean you won't lose guys financially, but you won't lose them because of the product on the field if you're competitive. Like, Indiana's a prime example of that. Somebody on Twitter was actually asking me the question of what's the difference between an NIL between Wisconsin and, say, Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio State. And I said, those teams are winning. And he said, well, why wasn't a big deal? I'm like, there's excitement within the fan base about what's possible. I'm like, Michigan, you could kind of say they were down, but they're a year off of a national title. Ohio State has always been incredible. Indiana had the best season that they've had in the last, 50, 70 years, whatever it's been. Like, their fan base is energized by that. And then they brought up Kansas, and I'm like, it's the same thing there. That was a school that is beating their win totals that they were having, going from like 2 conference wins over like a 5-year period. And now suddenly you're somewhat competitive in that environment. The fan base is energized. They're like, if you can do this with this, we can give you more to get there. Fickell came in. If he was a year later, it probably would have benefited more.
Yeah.
When NIL had already kind of been set, because the fatigue wouldn't have been there as much. He wouldn't have had to deal with kind of everyone trying to figure it out year where he kind of got stung by results. And it's burning him a little bit now because they didn't have a great year. The NIL space is going to be driven by what he can produce on the field. If Wisconsin gets 9 wins this year, there's going to be more money available for NIL. There just is.
Oh, absolutely.
That's how it's going to play out.
People are getting excited. You spend money. Like, that's just how it works. I would argue that no matter how much Wisconsin wins, they're never going to be in the tier of that top.
No.
And it just is what it is. That's a reality of college football and college sports. Let me hit you with this question. This is so I was hyping up Kevin Haywood. I was trying to have a discussion on who are the stars on this team, right? Who are the potential like guys on this team that I would say have star potential. Haywood was in that mix for me. I think he's going to be a dude this year. I think he's going to have one more year go to the NFL.
You see my boy Mandel?
Hold on.
He looks like a monster.
To declare Haywood a role player to date, a stud in 3 years, 3 players, media hype silliness. Are we getting ahead of the cart maybe for a couple of these young players? I would put Heiberg in that list, Haywood, both running backs potentially. Are we setting ourselves up for a little bit of failure?
No. I will be honest, from a physical tools standpoint, I think there's a better than 50% chance that Haywood ends up being one of the all-conference teams this year. I think he could be that good this year. I don't know if that means an honorable mention type situation, but I think that he will be that good right off the bat here. We're talking a guy who he may not be perfect technique-wise, but I do look at him and say he's physically just going to overwhelm guys on the edge. Like, we've seen him bury people already as a true freshman. What you call him a guy who is a, roster filler, more or less. True freshmen don't play on the offensive line. The fact he was even on the field tells you how good he was. I feel the same way with Mandel this year if he ends up playing at guard. Like, I saw they show him at 320, and I'm like, this dude is just massive. I'm like, and he's such an athletic freak.
He's going to fit Grimes' system so well too. Yeah. Mandel specifically, it's going to work so well for him.
Oh yeah, that offense, yeah, he's just going to bury people. I love him on the interior. I'm praying that they put him back at guard, because I think that's a guy that in 3 years is going to be catching NFL paychecks at guard in the NFL.
I think with Haywood, and I think your point is really, really good. Unless you're Travis Frederick, you don't play at all as a freshman on the.
He was a center, and which is tough mentally, but like physically, I feel like you don't need to be quite the monster of an athlete that you need to be a tackle to come in and play year one.
Now, I'll say this: like, time is going to tell, right? We could be wrong. It is what it is. I feel very confident in Haywood. I feel very confident to a lesser degree in Heiberger if he gets on the field. I'm trying to think what other young players we've hyped up. Certainly the running backs, Dylan and Darion, I think this year are going to have good years. I feel confident about them too. And the staff really likes them. I can tell you that. Now, people may say that doesn't mean as much considering the last couple of years of player development and player evaluation coming from the staff, but I feel pretty good about that group of players. And that's the other reason I was kind of optimistic heading into this year. Those recruiting classes we've been excited about, those trees are going to start bearing fruit if those classes were legit.
I think that's kind of the argument here is, do you believe in what the recruiting classes were or not? I think people are getting way too hung up on the transfer portal classes versus the actual recruiting classes. Everybody and their mother wanted the running backs. Dylan Jones and Dupree had Bama offers.
Yep.
Like, those are everybody wanted them. Haywood had some massive offers. Like, these are not guys that didn't have big time schools coming after them. You could argue that more with some of the transfer portal guys, but from the offensive linemen, even Mandel, like some of these guys, like I watched some of these guys film and I'm like, I can't remember these type of athletes coming in our offensive line groups. And it's actually the 25 class is kind of similar too. I feel really good about the offensive line. I think they're going to look really good in some games. And I think they're going to show their lack of experience in others. But I expect the offensive line to actually be significantly better running the football this year.
I'm pretty high on the offensive line as well. Derek Ostrander says our running backs will look good this year. Rajiv says, I would say for Haywood, we aren't overhyping. You saw moments as a true freshman. I agree there. Hunter says running backs and tight ends feels good about. Tight ends still a question mark. Running backs and receivers.
Dude.
I think Koziel,
an NFL guy.
Yeah, and then Hunter said, "Oh, I forgot about him." Yep. So Koziel, it's a big deal. Otherwise, you're right, Hunter. Like there's a ton of question marks with the returning guys, but yeah, you bring Koziel in, I think you're fine.
I think there's an outside chance Koziel ends up being the top catch guy in the entire offense this year.
I do too. And that's a good and a bad thing, I would say.
Well, Vinny is going to be a guy that I think no matter what, you're looking at him as an outside threat. What's his ceiling? 45 catches? Like
Vinny could catch more than 45.
You think so? As an outside guy? I think if you move him around more, because I looked at Kansas's stats last year. Luke Grimm was their top guy with 60-ish catches. He was their slot guy.
What Vinny catch last year? Vinny was over that last year.
He was in 40 something last year, I thought.
I'm looking. He's 39. I'm looking as I'm doing this. I think he can get over that. I really do. I think he's good enough. No,
the offense is different, and that's why I don't push it too much.
He's also not going to be an 80 catch guy.
No, absolutely not. That would be a slot guy if anybody's going to be in that. But I think Kojo is Tretch is also not going to be a guy that's going to get 70 catches. Like Luke Grimm was a dude at Kansas 3 years in a row. So that I don't think Tretch is that level of good quite yet.
Tretch is
I actually think that Luke Grimm for Kansas is a guy who's probably like a fringe NFL guy. And Tretch has got some work to do to get to that level of player.
Yeah.
But I think he could get to 40 catches. I think Kojo could be a guy who could get to 50. Like, I think legitimately he's that type of tight end where you can get him. Would you be shocked to see him get 500 yards receiving? I wouldn't.
No, not in this offense, not with what he's done in his history. And quite frankly, not with the lack of proven options at receiver.
Yeah.
Like you have Vinny, and then you have a bunch of guys that are either transferring in or they're young guys or potential guys. There's not a lot of proven there. That doesn't mean they can't be better. Doesn't mean people can't break out. But Koziel's the proven. Like that's the proven receiving room. So
he's going to be I feel like he's going to be the safety valve in this offense.
Yeah. But that's why you got him, right? Let's be honest. You didn't get him. He's not a great edge setting blocker. He's okay. You got him because he's
more of a split out tight end. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, y'all. We are going to wrap it there. He is Justin. Go check out the Bucky Report. They're great work there. That's always popping off. Nyzier's back. It's a big deal for Wisconsin. And again, we can discuss what it means in the greater context of college football. But for Wisconsin, F all those haters. It sure helps us. We'll wrap it there on Wisconsin. Thank you all so much. When you're done, go check out Locked On Big Ten, all the biggest stories and news from the Big Ten Conference over there on that channel. Bunch of content coming up this week. Finish it off for the rest of the week. We're going to watch Zach Kinzinger tomorrow, which is going to be really fun. I'm going to do a segment on that. Wrap it up there on Wisconsin. Appreciate you guys, and we will talk later.